What's going on, guys? The Comics Kid 2099 here, and I want to talk to you about a movie that I watched earlier this week. A series of unfortunate events. This came out in, I think, 2003. It stars Jim Carrey. It stars the girl from Sucker Punch, and it has a couple of other people. The woman who played Delia from Beetlejuice. It has the bad guy from the second Garfield movie, or might have been the first Garfield movie. The guy who also was in Muppet Treasure Island, who played Billy Bones. It has some actors in it, and this is based on the first 3 novels from Lemony Snicket's A Series of Unfortunate Events novels. There were, I think, 13 novels total. They were children's books, so they weren't like huge, big 500-page tomes or anything like that. They were probably like 150 pages each, and they were aimed at children, so they weren't like really tough to get through or anything like that. Bear in mind, I haven't read any of them, so I'm not speaking from experience or anything like that. But at the time that this movie came out, there was, I think, 11 books that had come out. The last 2 had not yet come out. And this was one of those movies, after the Harry Potter films had already gotten started, that was trying to mimic the success of Harry Potter, where, okay, we've got this long-running book series, and then they're making movies out of that book series. We're going to try and do the same thing, and we're going to have a series of movies based on this series of books. Another good example would be Eragon, which only made 1 movie. And this also only made 1 movie. This is based on the first 3 of those books. And I have to say, I saw this movie quite a bit when I was a teenager. It came out when I was in high school. I want to say a sophomore in high school. And I watched it several times. And my sister was actually a pretty big fan of the books. She had read all of the books. And in preparation for the Netflix series, she's actually been rereading the books. And I'm actually thinking about going back and reading those books. I know they're for teenagers and for children, but I'm really excited about the Netflix series. And I want to bone up on it and see what I'm in store for with the Netflix series, because I have a feeling maybe, hopefully, the Netflix series is going to be really good. But I had never read the books when I watched this movie, and I always loved this movie when I was younger. My sister didn't love it as much. Her big complaint was it focuses way too much on Count Olaf, and it makes him more the main character than it does the 3 children. And if you've never even heard of the books or the movie or the Netflix series, you don't know what this video is even about. Basically, you've got these 3 kids. Their parents die in a fire before the movie even starts, and they become orphans, and then they have to go live with Jim Carrey's character, Count Olaf. And then Count Olaf is basically just after their ridiculously huge fortune, and he's trying to find various ways that he can access their fortune, but because of the law, he's not able to access it, even though he becomes their legal guardian. And then they get out of his care, and then they go to live with another relative, and then Count Olaf basically follows them to that relative to kill that relative, and then they go to another relative, and he kills that relative, and then they come back into his care, and he keeps trying to get the money. That's basically what this movie boils down to. And the kids are sort of investigating. They find out that their parents were involved in something, kind of like how in the Harry Potter books, Harry's parents were involved in this big underground movement against Lord Voldemort and all of his followers. It's kind of sort of the same thing. This movie, when I watched it more recently, and it had been a while since I had seen it, when I watched it more recently, I did not like it as much as I used to when I was in high school. I still think that it's very funny. I still think that just about every scene that Jim Carrey is in, he is saying or doing something funny. Sometimes that's even a detriment to the movie. Sometimes I think that Jim Carrey should have pulled back a little bit and let some of the other emotions on the emotional spectrum kind of push forward a little bit more. We didn't always have to have funny, wacky Jim Carrey stuff going on here. But basically, my sister was right. This movie is way too much of a Jim Carrey movie. Instead of it feeling like a movie about these 3 orphans right here on the cover, instead of it feeling like it's their movie, this feels like a Jim Carrey vehicle where he can say and do funny things. And like I said, a lot of it is funny. It's not a wasted chance. We get a lot of really amusing stuff from Jim Carrey. When he is playing Stefano, when he is playing Captain Sham, those are really funny moments in the movie. Unfortunately, I don't want it to be Jim Carrey's movie. I want it to be more about the children. That's one of my problems with this movie, and that's coming from me having never read the books. I feel like this should be more the children's movie, and I don't know if I had just never picked up on it when I was younger, or I had picked up on it when my sister talked about that, and I just didn't care, and I just liked that it was a funny Jim Carrey movie. I don't know. But also, another problem that I have is that with any other movie that's based on a book, almost always the movie is going to be based on one book, or you're going to have multiple movies based on a book, kind of like how Eragon is based on the first book in the Eragon series, or with the Twilight books, up to a certain point, you had one movie based on one book, or with The Hobbit, you had 3 movies based on one book. This goes in the complete opposite direction, where you have one movie based on 3 books, because like I said, those books were very short. And the problem that I have with this is that it makes the pacing feel very weird and wonky. This doesn't feel like one story. This feels like almost a vignette piece with 3 short stories all chunked together into one big movie, or one normal-sized movie. So you've got the kids, they live with a relative, and then 20 minutes into the movie, they go to live with another relative, and then maybe 20 minutes pass, maybe not even that, and then they go to live with yet another relative. And the pacing, it doesn't feel like one story, it feels like a few stories that are all just grouped together into this movie, and that's exactly what it is. And that shouldn't bother me, because I knew that that was happening going into the movie, but as a movie, it kind of bothers me that this does not feel like a story. It feels like a few smaller stories. And maybe that's always going to be a failing if you're going to be basing a big, almost 2-hour movie, hour 40-minute something movie on a series of children's books that are not very long. You're always going to have that problem. You're never going to be able to get an hour-and-a-half long movie out of one of those books that's of that length. And that's the one thing that's kind of sort of worrying me about the Netflix series. Me personally, I would rather the Netflix series be one season correspond with one show, but then again, that's going to be like 13 hours or one season correspond with one book. But that's going to be like 13 hours for an entire 100-page novel. So they're probably going to have even more of a problem than this movie did. Now, maybe if they do the same thing this movie did, where one season is roughly 3 books, then you could get 4 seasons out of a series of unfortunate events. And maybe you could do that. You could really slow the pace down. You could have a few episodes where they're staying with Uncle Monty, and then Count Olaf comes in and he kills Uncle Monty or whatever. But right now, when you're trying to condense 3 books into 1 hour and 40-minute movie, it feels very fast-paced, and it doesn't feel like it's paced like one single story. So those were my 2 reigning problems with this movie. Now, having said that, I still enjoyed this movie immensely. I still think that Jim Carrey is very funny here. Sometimes he steals the show when I feel like he shouldn't. Sometimes he's kind of falls into that Jim Carrey saying and doing funny things thing that Johnny Depp does the same thing. Speaking of which, at one point, apparently Tim Burton was set to direct this movie, and apparently Count Olaf was going to be played by Johnny Depp. And when I found that out, I said, I knew it. That makes a whole lot of sense. This feels a lot like a Tim Burton movie, and Jim Carrey feels like he's kind of playing a Johnny Depp type character. But at different points in the movie, Jim Carrey kind of falls into his shtick where he's making funny noises, and I guess it's supposed to be funny. 99% of the time, he is funny, but once in a blue moon, I'm kind of thinking, that's not funny. I think the movie wants it to be funny, but it's really not. But anywho, overall, I did enjoy this movie, and maybe if you're looking forward to the Netflix series and you don't have access to the books, or you don't want to go through the trouble of reading 13 novels, then maybe you should check this movie out to kind of refresh your mind on this world, because there is some good stuff here. This movie is not completely without merit, but it is not the awesome, incredible movie that I remembered it being from my youth when I was a teenager. So overall, those are my thoughts on the Series of Unfortunate Events film. I hope that you guys liked this video. If you did, be sure to like, share, comment, and subscribe, and I will be back later in the week with another video or videos. In the meantime, I will see you guys later. Have a great rest of the day.